All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the latest set of RBT exam practice questions. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack and practice exams. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. You are tasked with taking whole interval data. The target behavior is laughing. Each interval is set at 10 seconds, and you will record for 10 intervals. Your client laughs for 9 seconds every interval, except for one interval where your client laughed for 10 seconds. The data you take will likely blank occurrences of the target behavior. All right, we have a discontinuous measurement question about whole interval data specifically. We can see here we're taking whole interval data, and the question is specifically asking about the data you're taking as it relates to the occurrences of the target behavior. In other words, the data you take is going to say what about how often the behavior occurred. Now, in whole interval data, when do we record a response? When a response is recorded is if that response occurs the entire interval. So we know each interval is set at 10 seconds, meaning every interval for 10 seconds, that behavior has to occur the entire time, or else we don't record a response. So in this case, the client laughed for 9 seconds every interval, except for one interval where the client laughed for 10 seconds. So if we have a total of 10 intervals, how many intervals did the behavior occur according to data? Well, only one, because for only one interval did the behavior happen the entire time. And that is how we take whole interval data. So in that case, we've got a client who's laughing a lot. 9 seconds every interval, that's a lot of laughing. However, the data are only going to show the client laughed during one interval. And that's part of the problem with discontinuous measurement is it can oftentimes underestimate or overestimate the behavior just by the nature of how data is recorded. So given all that information, what is our data saying about the occurrences of the target behavior? What is the data doing with those occurrences? A, underestimating. Is the data underestimating occurrences of the target behavior? Well, absolutely, right? Because the laughing is happening a lot. It's happening a lot. Every 9 seconds, every interval. The client is laughing most of the time. The data is only going to say, though, that laughing happened 1 out of the 10 intervals. That's a giant underestimation of how often the laughing actually occurred. So the data is very likely going to underestimate occurrences of target behavior. It's not going to overestimate. It's not saying it's happening more than what actually happened. The data are indicating it's happening less than what actually happened. And that's what we call underestimating occurrences. C, accurately represent. Well, we know it's not going to accurately represent occurrences, but this is how we're taking the data, and so that's just the data, what the data is going to say. But the data is going to likely underestimate occurrences of the target behavior. Again, one of the downsides of discontinuous measurement is we don't tend to get the most accurate information. However, there is a time and place for discontinuous measurement. We just have to be smart about when we use it. A behavior analyst is teaching a room full of parents about different basic reinforcement schedules. He's using real-life objects in his examples. At one point, he pulls out a slot machine and begins playing the machine for 5 minutes, celebrating each time he wins a spin. What reinforcement schedule was he likely demonstrating with the slot machine? Now, there's a very dead giveaway here, right? Because this reinforcement schedule is specifically called the slot machine effect, right? This is the slot machine effect. So if you know that, you could answer this question very quickly. If you don't, well, we're going to learn that today. So let's assume we did know that. How can we figure this out, right? So let's think about a slot machine, okay? You're playing a slot machine and he's playing the machine for 5 minutes. Does it matter how long you play the machine? Are you guaranteed to win a slot machine playing a slot machine because you played 5 minutes or 20 minutes? No. What matters is your responses, because those are what are reinforced, right? Not the time you're playing, but your responses. If I play, the more responses I play, then those will be reinforced. I could go for 5 minutes, I could go for 6 minutes, I could go for 10 minutes without ever winning. In this case, the slot machine effect is based on responses because you need a certain number of responses to get reinforcement. So is this a fixed ratio? Well, no, because we know a slot machine isn't fixed. If a slot machine was a fixed ratio, everybody would play slot machines because you could predict reinforcement, and that's obviously not the goal of a slot machine. So what about a variable ratio? Yes, a slot machine effect is also the variable ratio reinforcement schedule because our responses when playing a slot machine are reinforced on an average, right? I might win after my first 2 spins, and then next time I might not win for 7 more spins. That is a variable ratio. It's not an interval schedule because time doesn't matter at the slot machine. What matters is those responses, right? Because each one's a discrete response. You hit the button, you're either reinforced or you're not. And every time you're reinforced is on an average because it's not a consistent fixed rate, it's on an average. So again, a slot machine effect is also known as a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. And so if you see slot machine effect, you should think the VR schedule or the variable ratio schedule. Cassidy walks over to her bookshelf, grabs a book, and brings it to her dad. Her dad puts her on his lap, opens the book, and starts reading while Cassidy listens. What is likely the primary function of Cassidy's behavior? Now, function questions. You have to ask yourself, what did the learner achieve, right? Because behavior happens for a reason. We call these functions. Behavior happens to get something or get rid of something. What did Cassidy achieve with her behavior? What is the primary function of this behavior? She went over to the bookshelf, grabbed a book, brought it to her dad. Then her dad started reading to her while she was on his lap, right? So what did Cassidy achieve? What did she gain? What did she get rid of? A tangible. Well, Cassidy didn't have to go through this whole process of bringing the book to her dad to get a tangible because she doesn't obtain the tangible from her dad, right? She already had the book she needed. So it's not like she went through this process to get the book. The book is already there. What about B, automatic? Well, it's not automatic, right? Because this whole string of behavior, okay, involves her dad. So this is socially mediated. Remember, you're looking at this whole string of behavior and what ultimately Cassidy achieves here. What about C, attention? Yes, by getting the book, by getting the book and bringing it to her dad, and then her dad putting her on his lap, opening the book and reading, Cassidy is now gaining attention from her dad. That is the ultimate reason she's done this, more than likely. At least the primary reason, the primary function would be attention. And then D, escape. Well, it doesn't appear that Cassidy's escaping from anything, and so we can't pick escape. There's just no indication she's escaping. So the only ones you could reasonably pick are A, tangible, and C, attention. But it's likely not to gain a tangible because she's already got the book, right? She gets the book and then brings it to her dad. Her dad starts paying attention to her. He puts on her lap, starts reading to her. So really, the primary function of Cassidy's behavior is to get attention from her dad, and so her dad will start reading to her. So what is likely the primary function is C, attention. Claire knows that all she needs to do to get access to snacks with her mom is start crying. However, this does not work on Dad. Instead, Claire must ask for a snack using vocal language and then wait as Dad gets her the snack. How might you describe these different behaviors? Interesting and very common situation. We have a learner, Claire, and she's got 2 individuals, right? Mom and then Dad. Claire, to get access to snacks, she cries. Right? So that's the response that gains access to snacks in the presence of mom. Mom is an SD for crying because it's mom was going to give her snacks. With dad, though, Claire has to ask for a snack using vocal language and then wait. So very, very different behaviors, right? In the presence of mom, Claire knows she must cry in order to get a snack. In the presence of dad, Claire knows she must ask using vocal language and then wait to get the snack. Likely because in the past, dad has reinforced vocal language and waiting, but not crying, while mom has likely reinforced crying. That's how behavior starts to work, and that's how discrimination and differentiation and all these things start to take place, right? Differential reinforcement. Now, how are we going to describe these different behaviors? And we're looking at Claire's behaviors, right? So let's look at Claire's behavior here, okay? Because we're looking at Claire, who in one situation is acting a certain way, and in another situation she's acting a different way. Would you say these behaviors are A, formally similar? Well, no. What does formally similar mean? it means topographically similar, or it means they look the same. Crying and then using vocal language and waiting are not formally similar. They don't look the same. They're not topographically similar. A is out. What about B, functionally equivalent? Do they serve the same function? Well, what does Claire achieve by the behavior? She gets access to snacks, and then she gets snacks. So in both cases, even though the behaviors are very different, Claire is getting access to those snacks. We could easily describe these behaviors as functionally equivalent. What about B, sharing stimulus control? Well, they don't share stimulus control. What has stimulus control over crying? Mom. What has stimulus control over vocal language and waiting? Dad, right? So the behaviors aren't sharing stimulus control relative to the parents, right? So you would most likely describe these behaviors as B, functionally equivalent. You pass your behavior technician exam and are assigned your first client. On your first day with the client, you meet your supervisor, the client's parents, and the client's speech therapist who happens to be at the house during your session. The client's brother also introduces themselves to you. Who would be considered stakeholders out of the group of people you met? All right, this word stakeholder can be a little confusing, right? It's very formal sounding, very professional sounding. All stakeholder means is the person or the people involved who have an interest in the outcome of the learner's case, right? So whoever has a stake in the outcome is a stakeholder. So realistically, that is almost anybody in this person's life, right? So you, as a technician, and you get a client, you meet your supervisor. Well, does the supervisor have a stake in the client's outcome? Absolutely. The supervisor is absolutely a stakeholder. What about the client's parents? Well, sure, they're probably the primary stakeholders. What about the client's speech therapist? Again, 100%, right? Because they have a formal interest in the outcome, okay? What about the client's brother? Certainly. All these people care about the outcome. Now, when we think about ethics code, we don't typically think about supervisor and stakeholder in the same light, but that's really just for distinction purposes. The supervisor is absolutely a stakeholder, right? Absolutely has an interest in the outcome of this case, 100%. So of all these people you met, every single one was a stakeholder. So A, just the parents ignores the speech therapist and the brother. B, the parents, the supervisor, and the speech therapist ignores the brother. The parents, the brother, and the supervisor ignores speech therapist. So realistically, everyone you met is a stakeholder. All of these people have an active interest in the outcome of this case. A stakeholder wants to know how to properly identify whether a consequence is reinforcing or punishing. How might you answer this question? All right, I love asking this question because I think it drives home the idea of what a consequence is and what makes a consequence reinforcing or punishing. Because just because we deliver consequences with the intent of reinforcing or punishing does not make that consequence reinforcing or punishing. How do we identify if a consequence is reinforcing or punishing? A, you want to look at how the consequence changes current behavior. Well, we don't change current behavior because the consequence comes after current behavior. Current behavior has already happened. Can't do anything about it. A is out. B, you want to look at how the consequence changes future behavior. Yes, right? Our consequence follows behavior and affects how behavior looks or occurs in the future. We're only concerned with, does our consequence increase future behavior or does our consequence decrease future behavior? C, you want to look at how the consequence changes current and future behavior. Again, we're not changing current behavior, so that's out. D, you want to look at whether the consequence is preferred or not by the learner. Well, we're not really worried about that. We want to know how the consequence changes behavior, and specifically, how does the consequence change future behavior? If that consequence increases future behavior, we'll consider it reinforcing. If it decreases it, we'll consider it punishing. Great. Thanks for watching. Check out btexamreview.com. Please subscribe if you haven't already. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. We'll see you soon.